Nobody interviews over 300 fathers unless they're searching for something. I know, because I was searching, not for a book, not for a business, not even because I thought one day I'd become the Daddiez coach. I was searching because there was one question that scared me more than any other. How do you become the father your child deserves if nobody showed you how? You see, I grew up with a stepfather named Vance. From the time I was 4 years old until I was 14, he never sat down with me one-on-one to teach me what it meant to be a man. Not once, nor did he show me through his actions. Instead, I learned something else. I learned how to read a room, not because I was emotionally intelligent, but because I was trying to survive it. I learned how to pay attention to everyone's emotions, except my own. So when I became a father, I made myself a promise. My daughter would never experience what I experienced. Never. But after she was born, another question quietly took its place. It wasn't, am I gonna love my daughter? I already knew I would. It was something much harder. My question was, what does a good father actually do? Not what social media says, not what movies say, not what people post on Father's Day. I was asking, what actually makes a man a great father? I really wanted to know, because nobody had ever given me a framework. So I started doing what most of us do when we desperately want real answers. I started asking people. I started asking fathers, my friends, co-workers, strangers, literally anywhere I met a father who was willing to tell me his truth. And every one of them got the same question from me. The question was, if you could go back to the very first day that you became a father and give yourself 3 pieces of impactful advice, what would they be? Now, in all honesty, I expected some overlap, but I wasn't prepared for what actually happened. These men had almost nothing in common except the fact that they were fathers. Different ages, different races, different careers, different incomes, different childhoods, different stories. I wanted to make sure I had a wide pool. And yet, with all of those differences, they kept giving me the same answers over and over and over again. Over a 6-month period, I intentionally had that conversation with more than 300 fathers. I'm serious, 300. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't collecting opinions anymore. I was uncovering patterns. Not 5 lessons, not 10, 4. I made 4 discoveries that kept showing up, no matter who I was sitting across from. Those conversations didn't just change the way I understood fatherhood. They became the foundation of everything that I'm about to share with you. So, after talking with all of these fathers, I started paying attention to something else. Not just what they regretted, but why they regretted it. Because something didn't make sense to me. These were good men. Men who loved their children. Men who would have done anything for their families. So why did so many of them end up carrying the same regrets? It was truly puzzling. That's when I started noticing a pattern. Almost none of them said, I wish I'd loved my kids more. Love wasn't the problem. The problem was that love, by itself, didn't always know what to do. Think about the advice that we give fathers. Put your phone down, spend more quality time, be patient, ask better questions, make more memories, and none of that is bad advice. I've probably given some of it myself back in the day, but I kept asking myself, why doesn't it work? Why do fathers hear that advice, agree with it, want to do it, and still struggle to live it? Then one afternoon, I realized that I already knew the answer, because I know that father. Maybe you do too. He's sitting in his driveway, the engine is off, but he hasn't gone inside yet. Work drained everything he had today. His boss got under his skin. Money's been tight. He's argued recently with his child's mother. He's carrying things nobody even knows he carries. Before he ever opens the front door, he's already emotionally empty. Then he walks inside. His little boy runs up. "Daddy, come throw the football." His daughter can't wait to tell him about her day. His wife just wants 10 quiet minutes of his attention. And every one of them deserves it. And they deserve the best version of him. But all he has left is what's left of him. He doesn't have his best to give. That's the moment I realized that all the parenting advice in the world starts sounding different. Be patient, put your phone down, spend more quality time. Those aren't bad ideas. They're just incredibly difficult when life has already taken everything out of you. And that is when the real question finally revealed itself to me. Not what should fathers do, but who do fathers have to become to keep showing up like that, even on their hardest Tuesday? And that question changed everything, because I realized most fathers don't fail because they don't love their children. Most fathers fail because nobody ever gave them a framework to work from. Advice tells you what to do. A framework teaches you how to become the kind of man who naturally does those things even when he doesn't feel like it. Anybody can be a great father on a Saturday afternoon when work is going well, when the bills are paid, when your relationship feels healthy, your patience is full. Almost every single father is at his best when his life is at its best. But fatherhood isn't measured on your best day. It's revealed on your hardest one. Not on vacation, not on birthdays, not in the family pictures that we post online, on ordinary Tuesdays. Because ordinary Tuesdays become extraordinary memories to our children. And that's when I realized the fathers I'd interviewed weren't describing 4 different parenting tips. They were describing a way of becoming the kind of man that they wished that someone had taught them to become long before they became fathers. Once I understood that, everything changed for me. Because a tip survives a good day. A framework survives a bad Tuesday. And that's the journey I want to take with you today. Okay, so the first discovery, after talking with more than 300 fathers, I started noticing something I hadn't expected. And it wasn't something that they said. It was something they almost never said. You see, I expected fathers to talk about money, about promotions, about wishing that they worked harder, about building a bigger house with a bigger yard for their kids to play in, buying more things, leaving their children with more, and almost none of them did. And that surprised me, because if you'd asked me before those interviews what older fathers would have regretted, that's probably what I would have guessed. Instead, all of them kept talking about moments, ordinary, completely forgettable moments. One father, he looked down at the floor before he answered. Then he finally looked back up at me and said, "Spence, I would have put my phone down more." Another father didn't answer my question right away either. Instead, he just sighed. And then he said, "I spent so much time trying to provide financially that I forgot my kids were growing up while I was working." There was another father who smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that people make when they're happy. It was the kind of smile that people make when suddenly they remember something that they'd give anything to experience one more time. He looked at me and said, "I just thought I had more time, Spence. I thought I had more time." Different fathers, different races, different careers, different childhoods, different stories. And somehow they all seem to be grieving the exact same thing. I remember driving home one of those afternoons and asking myself a question. Why? Why do men whose lives look nothing alike keep arriving at the same regret? At first, I thought maybe they were just talking about time, but they weren't. Then I thought they were talking about work. They weren't talking about work either. I thought maybe they were warning me about my phone, or careers, or money, but it was all deeper than that. And none of them were questioning how much they loved their children. Not one. That part was the obvious part. They loved them deeply. What they were grieving was something they never realized until it was already gone. The bedtime story that they were too tired to read, the conversation they promised that they'd have tomorrow, the game that they thought there would always be another chance to attend, the little voice that eventually stopped saying, "Daddy, watch this." And that's when something finally clicked for me. The problem was never love. The first problem was awareness. Not awareness of their children. They saw their children every day. Awareness of themselves. Awareness of what was quietly shaping their decisions. Awareness of what they had normalized. Awareness of the ordinary moments that quietly become someone else's childhood. Because here's what I realized. Childhood almost never disappears all at once. It disappears one ordinary Tuesday at a time. And fathers rarely recognize which Tuesday they'll someday wish that they could have back. That's why every one of those conversations kept leading me to the same place. Awareness. Because you can't protect what you don't notice. You can't change what you can't see. And you can't build a different legacy until you become aware of the one that you're already creating. That's when I realized awareness wasn't just the first lesson, but it was the first stage. Because every transformation begins the moment a man finally sees what he's been missing. As I kept on having these conversations, I started noticing something else. At first, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It wasn't in what the fathers were saying. It was in how they were saying the things that they were saying. Like, some of them would laugh right before telling me something that still clearly hurt. Others would suddenly get quiet. They'd stare at the floor or look off into the distance like they weren't even talking to me anymore. They were talking to a younger version of themselves. One father told me he'd missed years of his children's lives because work had consumed him. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't asking for my sympathy. He was just telling me his truth. Another father admitted that his anger had slowly pushed the people he loved farther and farther away. And then one father said something I probably will never forget. He looked at me in my eyes and said, "I spent years trying to become the father I never had without dealing with the little boy inside who still needed one." I didn't even write anything down, y'all. I just sat there. Because suddenly those interviews stopped feeling like interviews and they started feeling like confessions. And I remember thinking, like, why are all these conversations all beginning to sound the same? These weren't weak men. They weren't absentee fathers or irresponsible men. They were fathers who loved their children. They were good men by most people's standards, but finally standing far enough away from their own lives to see what those lives had cost them. Not just what their choices had cost, what their pain had cost. And that's when another realization found me. The fathers weren't just describing regret. They were mourning, not loudly or dramatically, but quietly. The kind of grief that doesn't show up at a funeral, kind that waits 20 years before showing itself. Grief for conversations that never happened. Grief for the bedtime stories that their children eventually outgrew. Grief for the father they needed when they were 8 years old. And that's when I realized something. You can't build a different future while pretending your past never wounded you. Healing doesn't begin when you become a better father. Healing begins the moment you finally become honest about the boy who's still hurting inside the man. Just honesty. Shame will tell you that you're broken. Guilt will say, "I did something wrong." But honesty simply says, "This happened to me." And until a man can tell himself the truth about what he lost, he'll spend the rest of his life trying to outrun something that was never even chasing him. That's when the second stage finally had a name: grieving. Because before a man can build something new, he has to be willing to mourn what was never built in him. So before we keep going, I want to pause here. Not because we're out of things to talk about, quite the opposite. I think we finally arrived at the conversation that changes everything. Today we discovered two things: awareness and grieving. But I don't want to rush past either one of them, because if you are anything like I was, there's a good chance that you're already replaying moments in your own life. Conversations, decisions, ordinary Tuesdays that you'd give anything to experience one more time. And I think that those moments deserve more than 30 seconds before we move on. One of the things that I've learned after interviewing more than 300 fathers is that awareness takes a moment, but honesty takes time. So rather than trying to cram the entire framework into one conversation, I'd rather leave you with something that you can actually sit with. Because real transformation doesn't happen by just hearing more information. It happens by giving yourself the courage to wrestle with the truth that you've already heard. So we're going to stop right here for today. The journey isn't over, but I also want to respect the weight of what we've uncovered here today. And then this Thursday, we're going to come back and we're going to answer the question that wouldn't leave me alone. If nobody ever showed you how to be a father, how do you become the father that your children deserve? Because somewhere inside of those conversations, I discovered something that completely changed my life. Nobody was coming to finish raising us. I'm going to say that again. Nobody was coming to finish raising us. If our children were going to experience something different, we were going to have to become something different. That's where refathering was born, and eventually becoming. But I will see you guys on Thursday and we'll get into that. Before you go, I don't want to ask you for something, but I do want to leave you with something. If today's conversation stirred something inside of you, don't let it just become another emotional moment that fades away tomorrow morning. That's not what this is. That's exactly why I created this 7-day fatherhood reset. Not because 7 days will fix everything. They won't. But because sometimes the hardest part of change is simply knowing where to begin. It's completely free, it's practical, and it was designed to help you start building the kind of intentional fatherhood we've been talking about today. So if you feel ready, I'd love for you to download it. Take your time with it. Don't rush through it. Sit with it. Answer all of the questions in it, honestly, and let it become the first brick instead of just another good idea. And if these conversations are helping you become the father your children deserve, I would love for you to subscribe. Not because I'm chasing subscribers, because I'm trying to build the brotherhood that I wish I had when I first became a father. A place where men tell the truth, where we heal together and leave our children something better than what we inherited. But until Thursday, love your children well, tell yourself the truth, and remember, healing begins with honesty. My name is Spence Harris. I'm the Daddiez coach. From hustle to home, this is Fatherhood Rebuilt. Love y'all. I'll see y'all on Thursday.